Ladies and gentlemen, look at that, it works. Technology, it works. I'm live. It's so good to be live again. I went live almost every day for about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. And it's a lot of fun. I'm going to be honest, it's a lot of fun going live every single day and talking all things whiskey, teaching all things about great, I'm going to shuffle over a bit this way, teaching all things great single cask, educating about the society, learning about whiskey, appreciation, assessment, enjoyment, discovering distilleries, discovering ways to enjoy your whiskey, whether it be, I had so many comments on the cocktail session I did last year at some point. Was that this year? No, I did twice. I've done a big cocktail session twice now. Look, let's not beat around here. We're going to jump straight into it. Good evening to James Caden. Good evening to everyone who's tuning in. I really appreciate it. I was going to put a chat overlay on the screen. In fact, I'm just going to show comments as you can see them here on the screen as well. So why not dig straight into what's happening at the moment? I posted on Instagram just like an hour ago. A whole bunch of bottles have just arrived. I can't tell you what they're for, but they are coming soon, and that's exciting. But before we go into that, before I sort of do all the big reveals, I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe, you know what, with October Outturn has been and gone, if you like. If that's one way of putting it. It's had its day. It had a really big launch of October Outturn on Friday, the 1st of October. That was Friday a week ago. Of course, not all bottlings get the same attention. And I sometimes think there's some gems, as members often say to me, there's these sleepers in Outturn that they miss out on. They often miss out on what was that one cask that perhaps didn't get the same amount of attention that it perhaps deserved. So look at this. This setup's almost perfect at the moment because you can hear me, but the mic is just out of camera. I don't know how I've managed to do that. I like that, but it means it's not distracting. Okay, so Outturn, there it is on the screen. You can see it there. It was a bumper issue for us. It was a really big deal for us because it, for one reason, of course, rum in an old tea chest. There's the malt of the month. As of right this very minute, I think there's like 3 or 4 bottles left of the 54 we had on sale, which is great for us because we can have longevity to the malt of the month and it's always available. It says, evening all, greetings from the far north. Without the name coming up, I reckon that's going to be Mr. Howie, perhaps. Far north, fairly far north, Darren, if that's you. Or Darren or Carla, it could be one of you. There's that was malt of the month, pardon me. And that one's almost sold out. Like I said, there's only like 3 or 4 bottles left. Of course, tonight, and also October was also all about 148.1. That got so much attention. It's sort of like, how do you sort of slow that steam train down? I mean, it got seriously a lot of attention. But what tonight is all about is of course the underappreciated gems from Outturn. The casks that I should have zoomed that one in properly. There we go. The casks that perhaps didn't get the attention or people overlooked them because everyone's rushing for the malt of the month. Everyone's rushing for 148.1. And sometimes it is true. You find these casks that pop up that have been through the same rigorous process of approval of standards of everything as any other. However, they are not, they're often overlooked. So I'm just going to pop up on the screen. Here we go. 7.253, Who Ate All the Cakes, was one of them I want to touch on. 28.51, Eminently Effervescent, and G10.33. Oh, so good. Look at this. All these people jumping on. Darren, Harry, it was you. Swapped over so we're no longer anonymous. Anonymous, exactly. Okay. So we've got 3 casks that I said have recently come out that didn't get all the hype. Now, why didn't they get hype? You know what? They might not be superstar casks or codes. I want to just taste through all 3 of them with you now and have a see where we're up to here. Let's start with 7.253, Who Ate All the Cakes. There it is. So if you've got a dram of this in your whiskey and element pack, if this one just arrived, I don't know if some of you did, I just poured my little sample out of it here. You know what? There's a reason why there's that old line that this distillery number 7, is the other distillery that all distillers say is their favorite distillery. So if you talk to like the master distiller of any distillery in Scotland, whether it be Ardbeg or Glenfarclas or whatever, you ask them what their favorite distillery is, and their answer is always the distillery they work at. And they say the second most favorite is this distillery for good reason, because it is, it's a dressing malt. It's known to be sort of like the top malt used for so many blenders. It is designed by blenders. It's got a cool history as well. It was designed by John Haig, who is probably one of the history's most interesting whiskey entrepreneurs. Pardon me. One of history's most interesting fellows. He also designed Glenlossie Distillery, and he also designed, I'm going to say Benriach. He had involvement, maybe owned Benriach. I've got to go look. I'd have to check my history books, but it's very interesting that this is still to this day considered one of the most desired dressing malts of the top of blends for its rich, soft, creamy nature to the spirit. And I'm just noticing that right now, and it is like a cake shop in the glass. It's like rich vanilla cheesecake. Apricot Danishes. There's oily, like really oily apricot Danish. That's a good question. I wonder what the second favorite distillery would be for the distiller working at number 7. It's funny, actually. They don't have a visitor center. They don't have public. You can't do a tour. It's not accessible to the public. It is a workhorse distillery owned by Pernod Ricard. They use it for their blending. I reckon they're sitting on a gold mine with this. They do have a couple of single malts. There is a 16-year-old and I think a 10-year-old core range, or maybe 12. You see them sometimes. They are infrequent. However, just touching on this point for a second of single malt from this distillery, they first bottled their single malt in 1993. Think about that for a second. Society's been around since 1983. This code joined the society very early on as well. It's number 7. So probably in the first, I'd say second year, maybe 84. 85 was when maybe we first bottled them. So we bottled this as a single malt at least 9 years before they did. That's incredible. So when Pip Hills and Dana at the distillery were going into these distilleries and picking out casks, they were picking them out. They were picking them out well before they had these. Before these expressions were available on the market. Like this single malt was not a single malt. That makes sense. There's a few codes in our history like that. Brora comes to mind. Code 30 comes to mind. We bottled that as a single malt before they did. I mean, we are not unique to that. I mean, there were other independent bottlings at the time, sometimes of these distilleries, but there are some cases in the society's history where we bottled it as a single malt before anyone did, which is also very exciting. But anyway, this was one of them. So seriously, like a cake shop. I'm going to have a taste of that. 56.8%. I've thrown the little sample bag out. Sorry. Tropical fruits. Absolutely. Altmore too. Yes, good call. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also a relatively new thing, Altmore as a single malt. You might know the 12 and I think there's a 17 and a 21 or something at the moment in their core range for Altmore. We were bottling single malt Altmore almost, I could say, almost decades before they were. And that is, again, not uncommon for these distilleries that were traditionally used only for blenders. In fact, there's one of my favorite quotes is from Pip Hills, where he says that he was bottling single malts from these distilleries, from distilleries in Scotland. He was taking and bottling their single malts sometimes 5 to 10 years before they caught on to knowing what he was doing. Hey, it's Miranda. Marvelous Miranda, twice in one day. And this time it's on Restream or Facebook or wherever you are. That's so good. James Caden says, distiller's choice under the 16-year-old in the range, I think. Yes. I think there's a 16-year-old. I think there's a 16-year-old and there's a distiller's choice or something. I think it's a no-age statement as well from this distillery. Unbelievable. I know we've had a lot of 7s lately. In fact, our champs bottling is a 7.234. So, and that was a half this age. It was an 8-year-old. 16 years. It really picks up some far more of the oily character from the spirit. The cask just treats this one. It's an absolute treat. Cake batter, like cookie dough and cake batter. Very clean indeed. Just a small taste of that one and come back to that one later on. I reckon I'm going to bring up the other screen here. How's that? Oh, I'm not having much luck with that tonight. There we go. I'm going to try that instead. This is cannon fodder. Bring them on. Yeah. I mean, okay. So this is that's the one I've just been tasting was the 7.253. Who ate all the cakes? If you've just joined us. Now I want to talk a little about grain. I want to talk about this distillery G10.33. There's not much to talk about with this distillery. It was for a long time traditionally a gin distillery. It is a grain distillery. Used to make a lot of spirit for gins, and have started using the distillery a lot more for blended whiskies. Grain is the backbone of the whiskey industry. Grain whiskey is the spinal cord of the whiskey industry. It holds everything together because of the blended whiskey that has the requirements upon it for the capacities that they need it for. So like your Chivas Regals, your Ballantines, your Johnny Walkers of the world all use grain whiskey as the base of their blends. And then they use malts to dress those grains. But it's a misconception, and I've said this before, it is a misconception, an incorrect assumption, I should say, to think that grain whiskey is somewhat inferior to malt whiskey. That's a bit like saying Armagnac is inferior to cognac or vice versa. Neither of those statements would make sense. They're just a different spirit. And when I say grain whiskey, we refer to any grain used to make whiskey that is not malted barley. Could be wheat, could be maize, could be rye, could be corn, could be a mixture of. There's almost always a little bit of malted barley in that mix of making grain whiskey to spark the enzyme to actually get the distillation going, to get the ferment happening. But it just means any grain that is not malted barley in this case. So cocoa nut. Now, this was not in October Outturn, but it was released when we did our special tasting with Krishna Rajalingam from Basic Chocolates, where he paired this particular whiskey with one of the chocolates in the pack. This was my pairing of the night. I've got it here. Bam, there it is. Ooh, camera readjusting. G10.33 cocoa nut. I'm going to pour a smidge of that one. I know this whiskey well. I've tasted it a few times in preparation with Krishna and in this pack. Roasty, toasty, roasty, toasty. That's lovely. That is, first of all, can we just examine? I know talking color is a bit sort of whatever, but like, can we just examine the color on that? It's just really, really like, it's quite dark. Most grain whiskey comes from ex-bourbon barrels is quite light in color. This is from a second fill, heavy toast, medium char hogshead. A very charry, rich rum toast, sugary rum toast, banana bread. Oh. I wouldn't have picked that as a grain whiskey if I served it blind. Let's put it that way. I'd pick this perhaps more like a bourbon or more like a Oh, look at that. Darren, I didn't even see that comment. That's entirely right, though. This nose is so much like Blanton's cask strength. We love this. This is supremely underrated spirit, and I really mean that. People often look at these grain whiskeys and go, oh, yeah, it's grain. It's not as good as malt whiskey. But there's so much character and so much complexity in differences of grain used to make whiskey. So to write it off as if it's not like, oh, it's not a malt whiskey. It's like, yeah, it's also not a bourbon. It's also not a gin. It's its own category. This is lovely. I know what you mean by that cask strength Blanton's idea, the sort of rich sort of corn backbone kind of thing right there. Ooh, that's a big one though. That's a big whiskey. I did actually have a photo ready of the distillery, just to show you how ugly it really can be. It's a workhorse. I've used that word a few times tonight, but it is a grain facility. it's not so much a distillery. It is a distillery, but it's not that idyllic sort of like, beautiful sort of lush gardens surrounding some copper pot stills. This is, old school, big sort of industrial distillery meant to supply needs. And those needs have in the past been gin, more and more whiskey, in this case, blended whiskey. But for us to be able to pluck out a single cask from this distillery and present it to you is very special indeed. It's like coconut shavings. I think if you pass these kind of things up, especially something as rich as this one, you miss this at your own peril. This is, as Darren said, I think even saying it's like a Blanton's cask strength is seriously like, that's high praise. It is, because it's like, that's like fun, high praise in the, I think Blanton's cask strength is bloody great. Glasses up to you as well, sir, or madam, whoever that is. I'm going to drop water to this one. I want to see how this one reacts with just a bit of water. Like I said, these are the underrated gems from Outturn you're watching tonight. If you've just tuned in, I can see about 20 or odd people watching along at the moment, which is great. Welcome to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society Australia live streams. We go live quite often, but tonight I'm talking about the underrated gems from Outturn that you may have missed. And that includes the 28.51, which we'll get to in a second, the 7.253, who ate all the cakes, and G10.33, Cocoa Nut, which is the one we're on right now, that one there. 15-year-old, juicy oak and vanilla flavor profile, and from a second fill, heavy toast, medium char hogshead. That's what HTMC stands for. It's a cask treatment that provides a very rich and sumptuous element to casks, I would say. Provides a very rich and toasty flavor sometimes. And in my opinion, the second fills are where it really sings. Really sings. Great question from J Hodes, asks, what compares it to Blanton's straight from the barrel? I missed it. Okay. Darren said this nose, I'm going to throw his comment up for you there, J Hodes. Here we go. The nose on this is so much like a Blanton's cask strength. We love this. G10.33. Okay, you ordered and J Hodes said, okay, we ordered this one. Nice. Yeah, this one is like a cask strength bourbon. It's because it's probably a corn base in there. I don't know the actual grain type for this one. I know that this distillery uses predominantly corn and wheat in different grain types, but it is a cask strength 15-year-old corn whiskey. It's as close as you're going to get to a Scottish bourbon. Even saying those words in a row makes my skin crawl, but it's true though. I mean, and whoa, oh, someone's trying to call me. Sorry about that. And those kind of like that would sort of make you, make anyone's skin crawl, knowing that there's any comparison between the two. Something funky is just happening there. 1 second. Sorry, someone keeps trying to call me. What's going on there? 1 second. Yeah, sorry, we're having a bit of a. Something's going wrong with my. Again, I'm having some technical difficulties tonight. I'm going to have to get. Okay, all good. Okay, so yes, we all have to wait for Australia Post at the moment, don't we? Yeah. Look, I'm still waiting on a couple of bottles from, I think, that was sent to me from the office. I'm going to say, I think 10th of September. I think we're now on or a month after that, aren't we? Yeah, 11th of October. So yeah, I'm still waiting on a couple of bottles to come through. Anyway, that's Cocoa Nut. That's the way things go. Let's have a look at the last dram for tonight. I'm going to bring it up on screen. I showed the warehouse photo. There it is. Now, I think, again, here's another cask that I think people overlook, might not pay much attention to. Jay Heard said, hey, any good bourbon stands up to a single malt, in my opinion. I know you have a soft spot for bourbons, Jay Heard, so that's fair enough. All right, let's wrap this one up with one more dram, 28.51. I've got a bottle here. I'm going to pour a dram of this one. Oh, focusing in, 28.51. Let me just see if I've already poured this one here. Okay, here we go. Now, I actually brought some photos. I've visited this distillery, and I want to show some photos from the distillery. Just here you go, the 1488 drop-off point. So it's one of those distilleries that likes to think they've been operating since 1488. They all have wondrous stories, these kind of places where they say, founded in. But I mean, the record keeping of that era. Yes, there was probably potable distillation happening in that area, whether it was called Tullibardine, whether it was called something else, whatever. But still, very cool to walk through a distillery that has had, 500 plus years of, almost actually 530 something years of distillation history. It's very cool. There's the still room at Distillery 28. It's one of those funny distilleries that feels kind of a bit sort of murky. And I mean that in a good way. Like these, there's distilleries where you hear these stories of like Kleinliche Distillery where we don't clean the stills because then it gets rid of the grime and the muck and it gets rid of the flavor. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the flavor of it. And it does have actually kind of a funny sort of like, it doesn't feel like a clean distillery. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I feel like it's got a distillery that's got character. It's got this sort of feel around it. And I love that. But it's also a very strange setup. Everything's in the same room. And they've got their own cooperage on site, like a lot of distilleries do. They do sort of cask repair and cask assembly on site as well, which is unusual. A lot of distilleries have cask repair, like they'll take their old casks and char them and then recycle them. But these guys will actually have a cooperage on site as well, which is why there's hundreds and hundreds of barrels sitting at the back of the distillery there. Very cool as well. Apart from their sort of mass warehousing just down the road, they also have all this warehousing under an old, I think it's a train tunnel. They said it certainly looks like it. It's sort of some sort of tunnel. It's an underground sort of warehouse, if you like. And you can see casks of Glentockers sitting along there. A lot of distilleries keep what they call sort of third-party stocks from other distilleries and maturing in their warehousing. It's a very friendly industry that share it all around. There you go. I think it was a distillery manager of Aaron that wouldn't even clear the cobwebs from the Bond store character. Yeah, it's true. I mean, that might be taking it a bit far, but it could be actually bomb shelter might be the right answer for that. I'm not sure what it was originally used for. I know that there was sort of there's transport lines that run through the middle of it, so I think there was a train tunnel at some point, but it also could have been a bomb shelter, war bomb shelter as well. Workhorse, yeah, I mean, not really, Darren. I mean, that a lot of it goes into different sort of blends that we don't often see in Australia. Things like Silver Seal, things like Highland Queen is one of their blends that they go into. And what else have we got here? Those stills look a good wok or mortar pestle, well used and maintained to build flavor. Absolutely, yes. And they do have a visitor center, Darren, at this distillery. I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm being really harsh here, and not necessarily. It's just that it's not really a. It's an okay visitor center. It's very no frills. It's not like some of the others you'll find around the place. But look, it's got its time and place, of course. Then you can see some of the casks sitting in this sort of dunnage style, 3-rack, 4-rack high casks sitting on an earthen floor, sometimes even just single height high here. Some sherry butts at the front there, some 1999 Feta can, which it could be Feta can in there. It might be a barcode on the other side. It could be an old stamp. It could be something else in those casks now, but it's very cool to see some dusty old casks. And it was very tempting to sort of roll a 20, 21, 22-year-old Feta can sherry butt out and see how it's going, I know I have some friends who are quite obsessed with Feta can, and I don't know why, but you know what? Why not? Oh, there you go, even closer. So 40. Anyway, we're not talking about Feta can. We're talking about Tullibardine. There you go, said the name. Distillery 28. And I'm talking about Eminently Effervescent here, which is where we want to end up at. Like I said, I think this is what you would call a seriously underappreciated distillery. I've cracked the bottle here in the office. Eminently Effervescent is the name on it. Oh, Len's working overtime. It's in the spicy and sweet flavor profile. One of 220 bottles, first fill ex-bourbon barrel, 8 years old. Fruit goo is correct. Fruit goo is absolutely correct. That kind of jam you find at like a farmer's market, like that sort of spiced quince jam kind of thing going on. I think the spicy and sweet flavor profile is very apt here. This was not in the whiskey and ailment preview pack. This was just on Outturn. And like I said, tonight's a little bit, just a quick half hour on underappreciated gems from Outturn that have been through the same rigorous panel assessment and process as every other cask, but just aren't sexy codes. So we overlook them. Yeah, it was true. We do. Yeah, that looks great. Well, yeah, thanks, Joe. It was good fun. Is sharing casks, i.e., parking your casks at each other's warehouses as a loss mitigation, a big thing to avoid huge losses like Jim Beam had? Darren, I don't think it's so much loss mitigation because it's not really those kind of quantities. If you were to lose everything, most of the distilleries have warehouses in different locations of their own, sort of like, especially as they grow in size, they'll have warehouses on site, off site, down the road, and then 20 minutes further down the road, another warehouse full of a few thousand casks. It's not so much loss mitigation, I don't think. I could be wrong on that. I think it's more to do with sort of the trade, whiskey trading. So they'll often, like, they'll say they'll sell them this many casks, or this distillery will buy this many casks off them. And then they can use that either for their own in-house blending, or they can use that for their own, selling those casks on to brokers elsewhere. There used to be a lot more third-party selling going on in Scotland than there is today. I think it's a little bit more insular now than it has been, but I think there's a bit of column B there, Darren, but it's not. You don't normally see more than a few dozen from another distillery at a site, and they're usually. It's also just economics in action, because it's usually from the same family of distilleries that own that distillery. So when you're at, say, when you're at Longmorn Distillery, for instance, you'd probably see a few dozen casks of Strathisla Distillery casks at the same distillery because they're owned by the same company. So it's a bit of sort of, it doesn't matter where they sort of store them. Distilleries don't pay too much attention to the location of where the casks are stored. Even in Islay, where like Kalila, for instance, don't mature or drop on in Islay at all. It's all matured in the mainland. They don't think it makes any difference to the spirit in the end. And time will tell. I mean, it's all. That's a good question. Great question, Darren. Great question. Mm. Oh, it's got some bite. It's good. You remember those fruit roll-ups as a kid? Maybe those fruit roll-ups. It's like that. It's a plum jam and fruit roll-up in a glass. It might take water really well as well. Let's have a look. First Felix bourbon. It's got a lovely oak spice to it. Lovely bit of sweetness. Like sort of like white sugar sweets. Like what do you call them? Those sherbet lollies. Like those sherbet lollies. Delightful stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to go through 3 casks, a quick little rundown and taste of each as we went along tonight to discover some of the underappreciated and often overlooked gems on an outturn. I really appreciate you coming along the ride for these impromptu live streams. I sort of planned this one, only just sort of a few hours ago, just as a chance for us to sit down and have a dram and have a chat. Have a great evening. Have a great week. This week I'm participating in some panel assessment of spirits throughout the week. So live streams might be far and few between a bit this week, bit light on. And yes, good call out here to all of our Tassie members. Launceston event tickets are now online. They're on the shop page. We're having some technical difficulties with our events page ticketing at the moment. But if you want to go along to the you've got to make that night. Saturday, the 30th of October. It's on the website, just on the main shop page. As well as those 3 casks I just tasted. There's plenty of bottles of those available. Well worth jumping on, tasting something a bit different. Take a risk. Don't follow codes, follow flavors. And realize they've all been through the same panel assessment process of enjoyable whiskies from our expert tasting panel. Thank you, Darren, for that lovely comment. Really appreciate it. I will see you all soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.